I bought a used phone, and it still received messages from a man who died last year. I bought the phone because my old one died in the rain and because the guy at the radio market promised this one was clean as a whistle. He said it with a grin that tried to be charming and failed somewhere around the molar where a gold cap flashed. The stalls dripped condensation. Tarps snapped softly overhead. Everything smelled like wet cardboard and solder. The phone itself was nothing special. Last year's model, hairline crack from corner to corner, a chip near the SIM tray. He powered it on for me to prove it wasn't locked. Fresh setup screen, no Google account, no iCloud ghost. I paid in cash. He slid it into a thin plastic sleeve the color of a smoked tea and said, "Don't get it wet." "Advice taken," I said. Back home, my apartment felt like a submarine. The hum of the fridge, the boiled dry radiator tapping while rain silvered the window. I set the phone on the table, made noodles, and let it charge. Around midnight, when a kind of fake silence falls over the city, like a blanket that doesn't actually warm anything, the phone lit on its own. No SIM inside, no Wi-Fi yet. Still, the screen turned bright, and text appeared across it the way a thought appears, already formed, finishing itself as I blinked. "Are you safe? If yes, don't reply." The dash in the middle was a long M dash, the sort you only get if you care about it. I stared at the words until they blurred, then pressed the power button, then the volume rocker, then nothing. I told myself it was a notification preview from some leftover service, a ghost of setup. I connected to Wi-Fi to get it over with. The moment the phone tasted the network, another message came. Not a bubble this time, but a small pill-shaped banner that offered an audio file. No app name, no sender. "If you're reading this," I swiped. A voice filled the kitchen, close, like the speaker sat in my palm. It was a man's voice, dry but steady, with a trace of a smile inside it, as if he knew he was about to say something devastating and wanted to pat it with warmth that could not help. "If you're reading this, if it reached you, then I'm already gone." I paused the clip. My reflection in the black window paused with me. Noodle bowl forgotten. Rain stitching the glass behind it. The voice belonged to someone who could talk people into careful things. It didn't sound like theater. It didn't sound like a prank. There is a state you enter when a piece of tech behaves wrong. You become more than curious. You become devout. I connected my own SIM, set the phone to airplane mode anyway, and started digging. Stock apps, yes, but a notes app with a version number that didn't match the OS. Its icon was the same pale square as the real notes, except the corner folded differently, clockwise instead of counterclockwise. I tried to open it. It flashed, and then returned me to home like a shy animal. I searched settings for profiles, for certificates, for accessibilities that didn't belong. Nothing. It occurred to me to press the volume buttons together. The haptic inside the phone purred. Faint. The fake notes opened, not with content, but with instructions that weren't text. More like a looped GIF. Press volume up, volume down, volume up, hold power twice. I did it until my fingers learned it. The app bloomed into a file list with names that looked like code names. CEDAR, CYCLONEDAWN. Each had a small gray location pin next to it and a timestamp from last year, exactly 1 year and 2 days ago. Beneath them, another file without a pin. Record 1, with the same long M dash in the title. "If you're reading this, listen." I played it. The same man. "My name is Yaroslav Romanyuk. If the phone is in your hands, the plan might still be alive. Don't answer messages unless the dash looks like this," a pause, then the deliberate M dash I had already seen. "If it doesn't, someone else is talking." I paused again and breathed slow. The name scratched at a memory. I opened the laptop I keep living next to and typed it. The obituary came up first. A crisp photograph of a man with a plainly handsome face, serious hair. A year ago last spring, he had tragically taken his own life after struggling privately. There was a line about his work as an investigative reporter, and a line about his family that made me close the tab, because I felt like I was peeking into a kitchen window at dinner. I played the rest of the recording. Yaroslav's voice held even when he said the word "if." "If I'm gone, it wasn't from despair. There are files on this device protected by a schedule and your movement. Don't try to brute them. A map will show when you are near. First, the Poliklinika. The old one on Volitsia. Stand by the elevator and wait for the screen to tell you. Do not bring company. If you sense company, pretend to be lost." Pretend to be lost. I practiced the expression on my face and then laughed at myself. If this was a trick, it worked. I was already the animal it needed me to be. The morning knifed through the rain. The city looked like it had been wrapped in plastic overnight. I took the phone and walked to the old Poliklinika. The air there always smelled faintly of linoleum and iodine, even from the street. Inside, A guard in a sweater vest read a paper with too much interest. I rode the elevator to the third floor and let the doors open and close while I stared at the gray wall. The phone buzzed, then showed a white screen with a small blue arrow that looked like a paper airplane. It pointed down. I squatted, felt the cool dust on my knees, and touched the metal door at the base of the elevator where maintenance hid the battery. The screen drew a rectangle at the bottom right corner, then a tiny X. I pressed there. The panel clicked with a sound I loved immediately. The clean yes of something mechanical, designed by a kind person. Inside, taped to the battery with medical tape, sat a flash drive the color of a winter river. Next to it, a pharmacy receipt with a date circled in blue ink. The loops tight enough to bruise the paper. I slid both into my pocket, closed the panel, and rode the elevator anywhere that was not the third floor. When I stepped outside, the rain had thinned to mist. The sidewalk shone like a graphite pencil line. I didn't look back. I made myself be regular. Buy bread. Stand in line. Check the weather. The phone showed me nothing else. Twice I thought I heard footsteps speed up when I slowed. But footsteps are liars. I took a route home that made no sense, then decided to make sense of it by pretending I'd meant to stop at a shop that sold screws and lampshades. And I compared 3 lampshades with zeal. Back in my building, the lights in the stairwell worked every other flight. I let the phone sit face down on my kitchen table while I boiled water for coffee. The water forgot to boil. I stared at it like it might try again. When I finally turned the phone face up, a new message had arrived, short and sober. Don't go home. The key is in mailbox 38. For a second, that sentence didn't make any sense because I was already home. And also because mailbox 38 belonged to a retired geography teacher on the second floor who grew geraniums on her balcony. The message's dash. There wasn't one. It didn't need one. My heart sped in 2 directions at once. One toward the door, one toward disbelief. I looked at the peephole. Empty hallway. I looked at my phone again. Another message arrived, identical except for a period at the end, like a breath held too long. Don't go home. The key is in mailbox 38. I listened for sounds that shouldn't be there. The fridge hummed. A car outside coughed. Someone above me dragged a chair an inch or a mile. I picked up the phone, grabbed my jacket, and stepped back into the stairwell, where the air always smelled like wet concrete and old soup. The mailboxes lined the entry like tin teeth. Number 38 had its paint worn thin where fingers always missed the lock. I crouched, pressed my ear to the cool metal as if a small storm lived inside, and slid a nail under the lip of the door. It opened without complaint. Bills, a glossy real estate flyer promising light-filled living, and wedged into the inner corner where the metal folded. Something that flashed brass. I pinched it out with my fingers and felt the heat of my own skin on the metal. The key was small and heavy, the kind made for lockers with a round head stamped with a number. The key sat heavy in my pocket all night, like it wanted me to move but refused to say where. I left it on the table when I finally fell asleep and dreamed I was climbing stairwells that never ended. Every landing lined with rows of mailboxes, each one whispering my name. By morning, I had convinced myself I was the kind of idiot who let paranoia grow legs. But the phone was already awake when I turned over. Screen lit with a new message. Locker. Train station. Code 1189. The dash was there. Long, clean, deliberate. It looked like Yaroslav's style, not the chopped, quick kind that phones sometimes substitute. I pulled on my jacket and went out before I could talk myself back into safety. The air outside smelled of wet iron, like the tracks had been steaming all night. The station was nearly empty, just pigeons shifting like gray coins across the tiled floor. Lockers lined one wall, relics from the 90s with paint peeling around their hinges. My key slid into number 1189 like it had been waiting years for this moment. Inside, under a folded newspaper that had yellowed around its edges, was a manila envelope. Inside the envelope, photocopies of bank transfers, amounts circled in the same tight blue ink I'd seen on the receipt at the clinic. One page showed the name of a construction company I vaguely remembered from the news. Another showed the name of a deputy mayor. And at the very bottom, a photograph. A man with a split lip, bruises like fingerprints up his jawline. The same face I had seen in the obituary. I folded everything back, stuffed it deep in my backpack, and nearly collided with someone stepping into the row of lockers. A man in a leather jacket, eyes flat, pretending to fiddle with his own lock. He glanced at me, then down at my shoes, then back up. I didn't wait to test my imagination. I walked quickly, then faster, and when I glanced back, he was already gone, but my pulse had picked up a language I didn't know how to calm. That night, my apartment door showed scratches it hadn't worn yesterday. Small curls of wood scattered at the threshold like shavings from a key. Inside, the phone pulsed again, screen glowing with another instruction. Go to the blue door. No dash this time, just the phrase. Abrupt and ugly. I almost laughed because it was too clumsy, too eager. The messages I trusted had patience. Whoever sent this wanted me to hurry into something. I ignored it, shoved the phone into my pillowcase, and sat at my desk with the documents. One name kept repeating, Levchuk? S, connected to payments, contracts, signatures, a deputy mayor, yes. My stomach turned with the realization that I was holding something not meant for any stranger's hands. I wasn't a journalist. I wasn't anyone. I was just a guy who bought a broken phone. I needed help. The phone buzzed again, softer this time, like it was ashamed of itself. Another message. Trust Irina P. The dash returned, long and careful. And the name. It was someone real. A quick search showed her to be a public defender, the kind who took cases no one else wanted. She looked tired, even in her official photo, but her eyes had the calm of someone who had stopped being surprised a long time ago. I hesitated for hours before calling her office. When she picked up, her voice was wary. But when I said the name Yaroslav Romanyuk, something changed. She didn't ask how I got her number. She didn't hang up. She just said, "Not over the phone. Where are you?" I gave her a cafe 2 blocks from the train station, the kind that always smelled like burnt beans and served pastries that tasted of freezer burn. She arrived with no coat, hair damp from rain. When I slid the photocopies across the table, she didn't touch them. She just looked at me for a long time. Her jaw set. "You shouldn't have this," she said finally. He must have been desperate. Before I could answer, movement flickered outside the window. The man in the leather jacket, standing under the awning as if waiting out the rain. His gaze swept the cafe, paused, then slid away. I felt every hair on my arms rise. Irina saw him too. She reached into her bag, pulled out a card and slid it toward me. "If you get another message, send it here, not to anyone else. And don't answer unless you're certain it's him. Do you understand?" I nodded. She rose, left without touching her coffee. The man outside lit a cigarette and didn't follow her. He only stared at the smoke like it was the only thing alive. That night, back in my apartment, I stared at the phone until my eyes watered. Midnight came, and with it, another message. "Behind the blue door. Bring the flash drive. Come alone." And then a second message, seconds later, correcting it, almost mocking. "Not like that. Don't trust them. Look for the dash dash." 2 voices, overlapping, one careful, one careless. I realized then that I was standing between a dead man's plan and someone else's hunger to erase it, and the phone in my hand had become a coin toss between them. I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, waiting for dawn to decide who I was going to be. By morning, I had almost convinced myself to throw the phone in the river. Almost. But when I powered it on, the lock screen already pulsed with a new file, Cyclone. The blue arrow pointed me toward the western edge of the city, an address I half recognized from childhood, an abandoned dormitory. My hands shook when I searched the place on maps. The roof looked like a scab, windows bricked up, but one was painted bright blue, the blue door. I carried the phone in a pocket lined with foil like some paranoid spy, and I told myself it was only an experiment, that I'd walk past the dorm and then go home. But the closer I got, the stronger the itch in my chest became. The street was nearly deserted, puddles cupping the gray sky. I pushed at the warped entrance door. It groaned but gave way. The inside smelled of mildew and dust, and the sound of dripping pipes echoed like a clock with no hands. Half the hallway was blocked with collapsed plaster. The other half led to the blue-painted door I'd seen on the satellite view. The paint was too fresh compared to the rest of the ruin. My phone buzzed. A new screen overlay. A rectangle with a small key icon. I pressed the brass key from mailbox 38 against the lock. It turned with a reluctant click. Inside the room, the air was colder, stiffer. Someone had carved a cavity into the wall and covered it with a sheet of plywood. Behind it was a dictaphone, wrapped in a scarf. I pressed play. Static filled the silence, then his voice. Yaroslav again. Thinner this time, but steady. "If you're here, it means you passed the first test. They will try to imitate me. They will fail. Look at how they use punctuation. Look at the details they forget. The truth hides in patience." He coughed once, then continued. "If I disappear, it will not be by my choice. Levchuk's men think violence erases paper. It does not. I have left trails in 3 places. Find the last one in the library basement. Look for the blue marker." The tape clicked off. My breath fogged in the cold room. I slipped the recorder into my bag and was halfway back through the corridor when the front door slammed. Footsteps heavy as falling bricks entered. I froze behind a broken wardrobe. 2 voices muttered. "He must have triggered it. Check upstairs. If the locker's empty, we know he's got it." The sound of boots on stairs. I crawled along the floor, my chest scraping plaster dust, and slipped out a side door into a courtyard strangled with weeds. I didn't stop moving until the tram line swallowed me into its noise. That night, I called Irina from a borrowed phone. I told her about the dictaphone, About the threats. She didn't sound surprised. He came to me before he died, she said. He said if anything happened, pieces would surface. He named Levchuk. But without proof, it was suicide on paper. And proof is dangerous when only one person holds it. Her voice dropped. They'll try to scare you off. Or worse, if you keep going, you need allies. I thought about allies when I saw the scratch marks on my doorframe again, only deeper this time. Deliberate. That night, I couldn't sit still. I called the only person I knew from the market. The guy who'd sold me the phone. Dennis. He laughed too loud when I explained, but when I offered money to copy everything from the phone onto an external drive, his tone changed. Come tomorrow. Quietly. At his booth, with wires snaking across stained cloth, he connected the phone to a machine that looked like it had been assembled from half a dozen other computers. He muttered as he worked, strange partition here. Hidden sector. Whoever made this, they knew what they were doing. I left with a copy in my pocket and a new paranoia breathing down my neck. Because when I stepped outside, a police car slowed beside me. A plainclothes man leaned out. You've got something belongs to us. Phone. Best to hand it over before you make things complicated. His badge gleamed, but his smile didn't. He introduced himself as Investigator Kravitz. Every instinct screamed not to give him anything. I lied. Said I'd lost the phone already. His eyes didn't blink. Careful with lies. They write their own debts. Then he rolled up the window and the car pulled away. By the time I reached my apartment, the phone glowed with another file. Dawn. A countdown ticked across the screen. 3:14:55. Underneath, instructions. Play in court. Only there. 3 clicks on volume. Court. I had no business near one. Yet the weight of the files, the bruised face in the photos, the deputy mayor's name inked over and over, they burned inside me. Yaroslav had built this machine to keep his voice alive after death. And now I was carrying it, heartbeat for heartbeat, towards some final reveal. I stared at the timer until sleep finally dragged me under. When I woke, it read 1:09:22. The hours were already counting down towards something I didn't understand, and the phone, though silent, felt heavier than stone in my hand. The timer on the phone crawled towards 0 like a noose tightening. I couldn't ignore it anymore. At dawn, I called Irina again. My voice shook when I told her about the DAWN file, the countdown, the instruction to play it in court. She didn't pause. There's a preliminary hearing tomorrow. Levchuk filed a civil suit against the paper Yaroslav worked for, trying to choke their last investigation. That courtroom will be full. If the phone is set to trigger there, then that's where it was meant to end. I almost told her I wanted out, that I wasn't a crusader or a martyr. But then I thought about the bruises on Yaroslav's face, the careful dashes in his messages, the way his voice carried calm even when he spoke of dying. If he had trusted a stranger to finish the path, could I really drop it now? That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the hallway, every hiss of a car outside felt like Kravitz was waiting with handcuffs and silence. At 3 in the morning, another message arrived. Don't trust her. Give us the phone and we'll make this disappear. No dash. Sloppy punctuation, and a stupid promise, disappear, was exactly what Yaroslav had fought against. I deleted it and shut my eyes until light finally filled the window. The courthouse smelled of marble dust and sweat. The ceiling arched high, swallowing voices into echoes. Levchuk sat at the front, gray suit perfect, his expression the calm of a man who believed money was stronger than law. Kravitz hovered by the wall, arms folded, his eyes cold pins watching me. Irina guided me to the bench. When the moment comes, do exactly what the phone told you. The judge droned through the preliminaries. Then the phone in my pocket buzzed once, twice, 3 times, without me touching it. My skin went cold. I pulled it out, thumb trembling on the volume key. 3 clicks. The screen turned black, then lit with a single word, play. I tapped. The speakers filled with Yaroslav's voice, projected through the courtroom like he was alive and standing among us. My name is Yaroslav Romanyuk. If you hear this, I am dead. Not by my hand. Look, the video followed. Grainy, from a hidden camera. It showed Kravitz dragging Yaroslav into an alley. Fists flying, blood on stone. Date and timestamp. The day before his so-called suicide. Gasps broke out across the courtroom. Levchuk's face drained of color. Another file launched automatically. Bank transfers, contract scans, photographs of hidden construction sites, each piece tied back to Levchuk. And finally, coordinates embedded in an image. The police liaison in the gallery typed furiously into his phone. Within minutes, a whisper spread. A villa searched. A crowbar with blood traces recovered. A flash drive hidden in concrete. Kravitz surged forward, shouting the files were fake, but the phone interrupted with one last clip. Himself, on video, standing outside Yaroslav's apartment the night of the death. No denying that face. Officers moved fast. He was pinned against the wall before he could reach me. The judge banged the gavel, voice cracking over the chaos. But it didn't matter. The courtroom had already turned into a stage where a dead man spoke louder than the living. Later, when the noise thinned and Levchuk was led away in handcuffs, Irina touched my arm. "You did it," she said, though her voice carried exhaustion instead of triumph. I wanted to feel victory, but all I felt was the weight lifting from my pocket, leaving only silence. That evening I met Oksana, Yaroslav's widow, in a quiet park where pigeons pecked at old bread. She looked smaller than I remembered from her doorway, but when I handed her the phone, she held it like it was fragile glass. Her daughter, Anya, stood beside her, eyes sharp with the kind of grief that has learned to burn instead of drown. "Does it still?" Oksana began, but she didn't finish. Before I could answer, the phone lit one final time. A scheduled message, timed to the minute, 1800, the day of Anya's 17th birthday. A video opened. Yaroslav's face, softer here, filmed in his kitchen. "If you're seeing this, it means someone carried my voice far enough. Thank you. And Anya, don't be angry forever. I love you. That is all." The screen dimmed, then blackened for good. No more files, no more arrows. Just silence. Anya pressed the phone to her chest. Oksana's tears came quiet, like they had been waiting a long time. I stood there awkwardly, unsure if I was intruding on something too intimate for strangers. But Oksana lifted her gaze. "He chose you. That means something." I walked home with only the empty case of the phone in my pocket, the brass key still warm against my palm. For the first time in weeks, there were no footsteps behind me, no sudden vibrations in the dark. Just quiet. A quiet I wasn't sure I'd ever learn to trust again. The quiet didn't last. Silence has weight when you've lived too long with messages arriving out of nowhere. For days, every vibration of the fridge or buzz of the street lamp outside tricked me into checking my pockets, even though the phone was gone. I told myself I'd handed everything over, that my part in Yaroslav's story was finished. But then the news broke. Levchuk denied everything. His lawyers claimed the recordings were fabricated, the documents doctored, the videos deepfakes. And though Kravitz was suspended, rumors spread that half the police force still answered to him. Without the phone in my possession, I felt naked, as though my only shield, the ghostly voice that had guided me, was gone. One evening, Dennis found me. He appeared out of the market crowd like a stray dog you once fed. "You think it's over?" he asked, cigarette bobbing between his lips. "They're not done. Files you copied with me. Don't you wonder why he made us back them up twice? He didn't trust one trail. He left redundancy." I didn't want to hear it, but Dennis pressed a USB drive into my hand. This one wasn't on the phone, buried deeper. He called it Afterglow. You'll see. At home, I stared at the drive until the screensaver of my laptop dimmed the room. Finally, I plugged it in. A folder opened, fragments of diary entries. Half-finished audio notes. Yaroslav's voice. Rawer here. "If they find the phone, they'll call it fake. If they kill me, they'll call it despair. But maybe, if some stubborn stranger keeps carrying these crumbs, the truth will force its way in. My death isn't the end of the story. It's just the ugly middle." The files didn't hold more proof. No smoking gun. What they held was doubt, sharpened into a blade. Dates, hints, inconsistencies. Enough to pry open cracks in the official version. Enough to keep his voice alive a little longer. The next day, the paper he had worked for published excerpts, not as evidence, but as testimony. And the city buzzed with whispers. Maybe the journalist hadn't been weak. Maybe he'd been silenced. People argued in trams and bakeries and smoky bars. For the first time, doubt was louder than silence. But doubt has its price. Someone followed me again. A different man this time. Heavy boots behind me until I ducked into a pharmacy and waited with my heart in my throat among rows of vitamins and cough syrup. When I finally stepped back onto the street, he was gone. Or maybe waiting just around the corner. I called Irina. "How long until they stop?" I asked. Her voice was steady. "They don't stop. But the more people hear his story, the harder it is to bury. You've already done what most wouldn't dare. If you want to walk away now, no one would blame you. But I couldn't. Because even if the court stripped the recordings bare, even if the lawyers twisted every comma, Yaroslav's daughter would still grow up knowing her father's voice hadn't been a whisper into void. Someone had carried it further. That night, for the first time since the whole thing began, I dreamed not of stairwells or mailboxes or footsteps. I dreamed of a man sitting at his kitchen table, scribbling dashes onto scraps of paper, rehearsing messages for a stranger he would never meet. He looked up at me and smiled. Not triumphant, not tragic, just grateful. When I woke, the room was still. The phone was gone. The drive was hidden where no one would look. My role was ending, I thought. But then again, I had thought that before. And part of me already knew. Some stories don't end. They only echo. And when they land in your hands, you have to decide whether to drop them or carry them further. I had chosen. Even if my pockets were empty now, the weight of Yaroslav's voice remained. Weeks passed. The city returned to its ordinary rhythm. Trams screeching, neighbors arguing over stairwell repairs, markets buzzing with counterfeit perfume and secondhand electronics. Outwardly, everything looked normal again. But inside me, normal had fractured. I caught myself checking strangers' punctuation in text threads, scanning for the length of dashes, as though Yaroslav could still be hiding there. The trial proper loomed. News outlets buzzed with speculation. Would the files stand? Would Levchuk's empire crack? And in every headline, Yaroslav's name resurfaced. Not as a tragic suicide, but as a man whose work had torn a hole in the city's silence. I read the stories in cafes and buses, pretending to be an ordinary reader. Yet I knew the reason those articles existed was because one phone had found its way into my hands. One evening, as dusk painted the streets violet, I stopped by the park where I had last seen Oksana and Anya. They sat on a bench, bundled against the chill, feeding sparrows with crumbs from a paper bag. Anya spotted me first. She lifted the phone. They still had it. The screen was dark, but she cradled it like a relic. "It hasn't spoken since," she said. Her voice was both proud and wistful. "That means it finished its work," I told her. She studied me. "Or maybe it's waiting." I didn't know how to answer, but when Oksana touched my arm, her hand cold but steady, she whispered, "You gave us back his voice." That's more than the world usually allows. Later that night, back in my apartment, I sat by the window with the city lights flickering like weak stars. For the first time since the whole nightmare began, I felt the absence of the phone not as a wound, but as a strange kind of peace. The story was no longer mine to carry alone. It belonged to courts, to journalists, to his family, to anyone willing to listen. Still, part of me knew I'd never escape it completely. My life had split. Before the phone, and after. Before, when I thought used electronics were just cheap bargains. After, when I knew they could hold the last heartbeat of a man who refused to disappear quietly. On the final night of the trial, the verdict came, guilty on multiple counts. Levchuk's fall was swift, brutal, public. Kravitz's face glared from headlines in disgrace, and among the crowd outside the courthouse, people lit candles not for justice alone, but for Yaroslav. His name carried through the air in voices that would not be silenced again. I didn't join the crowd. Instead, I walked the long way home, letting the sound of the city wash through me. At one corner, a vendor shouted, selling phones stacked like bricks. I smiled without meaning to, the irony sharp. When I reached my apartment, the silence felt different. Not threatening, not waiting to be broken, just silence, real, unburdened. I placed the brass key from mailbox 38 on my windowsill, a small token of the path I'd walked. It caught the streetlight, gleaming faintly. For the first time in months, I lay down and closed my eyes without fear of footsteps outside my door or phantom messages lighting the dark. The story had ended, but the echoes of it, the voice, the dashes, the relentless will of a man who refused to let truth die with him would always remain inside me. And that was enough.